Well, greeting again, folks. We're now going to continue on with the Job series, and Wade's going to discuss the details of the commentary on Job Part 4, which covers the chapters of Job, chapters 19 to 24. Part 5 covers the chapters of Job, chapters 25 to 30, and Part 6 covers the chapters of Job, chapters 31 to 36. Wade, what would you like to tell the people of the continuation of where we're at and the three so-called friends of Job and of course Job's wonderful response to their evil, unjustified critique of his inflicted situation?
Yes, it is that bad. And in the first three parts, we saw the Satan and the demons go before the celestial host. The sons of God were then asked about what was happening, and Satan's asked by God, "What have you been doing?" And he's saying, "I'm going up and down on the earth now, to and fro." And God then tests Satan and says, "What about my servant Job?" So instead of saying, "Oh yes, Job's quite good," we have to remember that it was Satan that objected to the creation of man. So he couldn't say anything nice about any of us. So there's a righteous man, Job, the son of Issachar, grandson of Jacob, lived righteously according to the law. The law hadn't been given to Moses, but had been given to Noah, and through Abraham, Isaac and Jacob. They knew what the law was, and they all kept the law. All of these first part deals with the accusations against Job relating back to the laws of God. So he was doing these things, therefore he must have been breaching this law and that law and the laws regarding widows and orphans, and on it went. And this ad nauseum in the three parts of the things they were saying to him. Now, in the first three sections, Job had raised the requirement for there to be a mediator, a redeemer, to argue our case, the human case, with God on an individual basis, so that we could be forgiven. Now, that wasn't obvious from the first three parts through to chapter 18. But in chapter 19 of part 4, in verse 25, Job then speaks in the Spirit and says, "Through faith, I know my Redeemer liveth." And this changes the structure for the next four parts, where from part 4, part 5 and part 6, we see the development of the Redeemer and his place in the structure of the law and the testimony. In part 7, we then go on to the fact that the Redeemer appears as the God of Israel to Job and these three, and castigates these three for their positions through the first parts, certainly parts 1 to 3, and for their comments later in 4, 5 and 6. But they don't really make much impact after this movement from 4 through discussing the Redeemer of Israel and the God of Israel. In the structure of Job, we see Eloah is the one true God, and the subordinate God of Israel is referred to as the El in generally, and Eloah is also called El Shaddai, the Almighty, and he is referred to as Elohim, meaning Ha-Elohim. The structure of Job shows how Eloha created the Elohim, who are the sons of God. In creating the multiplicity, Elohim is a plural word. Eloha is singular and admits of no plurality whatsoever. There is only one true God. And this Eloha in the Chaldean was Eloha, which then broke down into the Eastern and the Western Aramaic from the Hebrew, and then Arabic came out of the Eastern Aramaic, and Allah became the word for God in the Arabic. It admits of no plurality. It refers back to Allah in the Chaldean and Eloha in the Hebrew. That is God, the one true God. When God created these things, he became Ha-Elohim, the Elohim, meaning he became the center, the centrality of the multiplicity of gods that were the sons of God, the Elohim. That is the plural understanding of the Elohim and what it is. And there are untold millions of them. It's not a matter of having two gods that are Elohim. They aren't. There's only one true God, and he alone is immortal. No man's ever seen him or can see him. No man's ever heard his voice.
In the Trinitarian system, they think there's only one Elohim.
Three-headed God. They brought the triune God and superimposed it on the biblical structure.
Right, and they also think that he's always lived and he never had a beginning, like Eloha the Father.
That's why they can't write a commentary on Job that makes any sense.
Right, yeah.
And that's why we, for the first time in 2,000 years, have written a decent commentary on Job that explains it. Because in the 20th century, the Church of God was taken over by religious heretics, Binitarians and Ditheists. Herbert Armstrong was a Ditheist heretic that should never have been permitted entry to the churches of God. And he will be put in the cities of refuge at the end in the second resurrection, so that the people whom he has alienated and prevented from entry to the first resurrection won't kill him until they're educated properly. It's that serious.
Yeah, some of those people are still out there. They still refuse to do their own study and research because they were under auspices of those churches. Oh, you don't look at anything else, you don't get itchy ears, things
exactly.
like that. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, this revealed knowledge just opens up the whole concept of Job. And as you say, it's never been done before. The information in there is quite detailed. It's easy to understand. It's laid out chapter and verse, explanation, chapter and verse explanation. You can't get wrong. It just.
Now, Bullinger made one mistake when he started dealing with Job. Well, he made a couple of mistakes, but he didn't have quite the dating correct because of the few errors in the 19th century scholarship. And this was published. His work on Job was published in 1903. And then, curiously, that's the time that Uriah Smith died, the last great Unitarian theologian of the Laodicean system, the Adventists. And he died at the same similar time. And these people, that was the last reasonable commentary done on Job. The Church of God from 1940 was totally unable to write a commentary on Job and avoided it because they were Ditheists under Armstrong, and they will be punished for all of that, and no fault of their own. They've diligently tried to follow what they were told by a heretic, and it's very sad. But this work on Job is critical to your understanding of the nature of God and of what's happening, what happened to him before the Exodus, 160 years before the Exodus this happened. Moses wrote this text 25 years before the Exodus, or over that period, and he then went to Christ and went into Egypt and brought Israel out of Egypt. And this was done 25 years before he did that. So all of this is really important material. And it goes then through 5 and 6. We'll see the errors in the Oxford Annotated RSV and the Oxbridge commentaries from 1757, when Dr. Kennicott in Oxford decided that Zophar's third discourse was actually Zophar's third discourse and named it as such in the Bible, which is totally misleading, and it isn't. The Sonsino doesn't regard it as Zophar's third discourse at all. None of the rabbinical scholars do regard it as Zophar's third discourse. So all of these things you will learn, pick them up, and the timings and the sequence and what they're doing will take you through, and you will see the errors in the Oxbridge commentaries. You will see how this develops through part 6 into the discourses of Elihu. Now, Elihu is sent in the Holy Spirit to deal with those three and with Job. And then when Elihu has finished in his discussions, we then see the Christ arrives as the God of Israel and deal with Job and with the three in part 7, and then determine their guilt, and then how they are forgiven, and then details Job to pray for them in part 7 in order for them to achieve forgiveness under their sacrifice, which is then accepted by Job's petition. And this sequence, where Elihu is sent by God in the Holy Spirit, relates to the church, warning the whole world in the last days before the Messiah arrives to deal with mankind and establish the millennium. And that's the sequence of what's happening in Job. And it's most important that we understand what is happening, who is saying what and why, and how Eloha is the centrality of the one true God position as it's manifested in Job, and especially in chapter 38. In the last few chapters, from 38 to 42, are dealing with the one true God that created the earth, and then the God of Israel, who was sent to refurbish the earth, is then sent to address Job. He'd spoken to Abraham, to Isaac and Jacob. He wrestled with Isaac, and he gave Jacob guidance and protection and established him as Israel, the father of the nation of Israel, which was to become the centrality of the plan of salvation. Mankind was to become Elohim in 001, that is number 001. The plan of salvation was outlined, 001A. Israel became the vineyard of God and the means of the direction of mankind, 001B, 001C, and 001D. All of this is contained within the references in Job. And it is most important, and these sequences are critical to your understanding of the faith. Anyway, we've done it now, and it's all four are complete. That is, all of the texts, we've done 3 videos for the seven parts, and that's important. And then we've also done the videos on the 4 parts of the millennial structure through to the second resurrection. And that's all before us, and it will start very soon. In 2027 you will see the witnesses, and you will see the whole structure cleaned from the face of the earth, and the one true faith brought back for the next 1,000 years. That's the critical aspect, and the important thing about Job is underlining the plan of salvation as we see it develop.
So please, folks, access our website for these papers. They're available to anyone to download, either on a digital hard drive, or you can print them to proliferate this most important knowledge to everyone that you know. Well, thank you very much for listening.